Dear brothers and sisters, it might not be out of place if I present myself to you. My father was converted and baptized when he was doing his college by a Canadian missionary. The missionary has taught him to love so much the Eucharist that he used to go to Mass every day. And he brought me, his first male child, with him as soon as I've learned to walk. So it is for me a special honor and joy today to lead this meditation with you on the topic Eucharist and Mission. In the Apostolic Exhortation, Sacramentum Caritatis, the Holy Father, Benedict XVI, refers to what he said in his encyclical Deus Caritas Est. Nothing is better than the gospel and the encounter with Christ. Nothing is better than to know him and to share his friendship with others. Then he applied these same words to the sacrament of the Eucharist, saying, "We cannot keep to ourselves this love which we celebrate in the Eucharistic sacrifice." So, a truly Eucharistic church is necessarily a missionary church. I want to make first a preliminary clarifying remark. The Eucharist is a mystery of faith, but it opens out to unbelievers. Mysterium Fidei is the solemn acclamation we proclaim when the bread is changed into the body of Christ and the wine turned into his blood. This reminds us of another acclamation, Sancta Sanctis, when people were reminded of the exclusive right of believers, of disciples sanctified by baptism, to receive the most sacred body and blood of the Lord. The acclamation was also meant to be a warning not to give the Eucharist to those not initiated. Sure, the reception of the sacrament requires faith and is not allowed to those who still do not know the truth of the faith. But let us listen to the final acclamation of the Mass, Ite Missa Est, which is the sending of the disciples to bring the gospel to the world. This is the great convocation to assemble the whole mankind into the church, the family of God. It is the great invitation to join in the eschatological banquet. The Eucharist, so, is of the faithful, but for the world. The necessary connection between Eucharist and mission is an obvious consequence from what you have meditated upon these days, because the Eucharist builds the church. And the Eucharist reminds us of the universal salvation. The Eucharist builds the church. The people of Israel gathered, family by family, to eat the Paschal meal, standing with a girdle around their waist, sandals on their feet, and the staff in their hand, ready to start a long journey of deliverance from slavery. The new Paschal meal in the upper room sends the Pusillus Grex into the world. The new caravan would, along the journey, gather all the peoples of the world and march toward the heavenly Jerusalem. The Eucharist builds the church because it is the sacrifice of the cross which delivers us from sin. The body is given up, and the blood is shed for the multitude. Historically, we can see the church being built when we see the Eucharist celebrated in the upper room, in the individual houses of the primitive church, in the catacombs, in the Roman basilicas. Then through the missionaries, in the small chapels, in every corner of Europe, of Africa, of America, of Asia. And finally, at the Eucharistic congresses in various parts of the world, like today here in this beautiful city of Quebec. Before the ramification into the seven sacraments, the Eucharist builds the church as a sacrament. That is, a sign, an instrument to achieve the union between God and the human beings and the unity of mankind. The second reason, the Eucharist establishes the new and eternal covenant. The Catechism of the Catholic Church gives a special importance to the covenant between God and Noah, because it was a covenant with the whole human family, anterior to the temporary restriction of the covenant with Israel. Now, the new and the eternal, the definitive covenant, is again universal for the whole humankind. Jesus said, "When I will be lifted up, I will draw everybody to myself." The Eucharist is not for a closed circle. Our churches must have doors and windows open. The windows open to let the message out, and the doors open to invite people in. When we sing Gloria in excelsis Deo, we reenact the mystery of Nativity. We invite the unveiling of the modern world to the manger. When we sing Agnus Dei, we invoke the mercy of God also for those who ignore their sinful condition. Now I want to emphasize on one point of actuality: universal salvation and mission. Since Vatican II, the Church is more aware of the mystery of universal salvation. Gaudium et Spes says that God has His ways to save everybody, which we may not know. But we know that He wants and is able to save everyone. Now, the wrong conclusion from this consoling truth would be that we need no more to engage in the missionary endeavor. God has His ways to save everyone, but He has made it clear that the most common and desired way is that those who have first received the faith be instruments of its transmission. We should not despair of those who seem not to know God and Jesus, but how much more hope we can entertain for those who come into the whole truth of faith. The Eucharist is the bread of truth, the truth of love. God has so loved us that He gave His life for our redemption, and He has given His body as food so that we may live and live abundantly. Lord, You have made us for Yourself, and our heart is restless until it rests in You. Many people are still far from the center where they can rest. People run after money, power, and all kinds of gratification, which leave their hearts emptier than ever. God sometimes wakes us up the hard way. In the terrible bewilderment caused by the recent disastrous earthquake in Sichuan, China, people all of a sudden discovered that most precious values are human life, family affection, and universal brotherhood. And the leaders of our nation in Beijing led the way in the rediscovery of these values, thus opening our heart to the hope for a new China. But many questions remain unanswered, and they can be repeated also for all the other calamities, like the one that struck Myanmar. Why the loss of so many innocent lives? Only the faith tells us that they have not been lost. The innocent victims are being received into the bosom of a loving Father. This was the happy surprise they found at the moment of their death. Another question, where was God in these calamities which struck hundreds of thousands of people? We know the answer. Jesus was there, under the debris, in the darkness, in the pain, in the despair. He was with each of the victims. He was in them, making them worthy of completing what was lacking in his sufferings. Faced with such calamities, people without faith may protest against God. We should not be scandalized by this. Their protest